You're in Korengal Valley, Afghanistan, in an Apache attack helicopter, and you just ran out of bullets. What do? We're gonna find out on this episode of In the Hangar. Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Hangar. I'm Bailey Ward.
I'm Christy Wong.
And I'm Dan Milliken. And let's see, somebody's not like the others.
Oh, oddball out.
My airline, okay, Eagle.
Well, welcome. This episode, we've got our sponsors. We're going to talk more about them at the end, but I want you to check them out in the description below, and let's get to it. Daniel Flores, thank you so much for being on this show.
Thank you so much.
Here, I'll just high five you for the
I love the Apache helicopter, and Daniel is somebody who has flown the Apache in battle.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, thanks for having me on board, Dan, and Chrissy and Bailey. This is an honor being here. And also, yes, I flew the Apache helicopter. I started flying it in 1991, and in the year 2005, I was actually mobilized to go to Afghanistan, and that was a good thing, I'll say, because the fight was really roaring in Iraq at the time, and I thought, like, wow, I'm glad I'm not going to be a part of that. I thought I'd be able to take my snowboard and everything else, go to Afghanistan, check out the mountains and all that good stuff. But I got mobilized in December of 2005. And that was at Fort Hood, Texas. And we ended up, they gave us the week off for Christmas and New Year. So I'd come home to be with my family. I had my wife, Lisa, and my daughter, Shelby, that was 10, and Eric, he was 7 at the time. And so when I got home, I was in my breakfast area with the window overlooking our patio, and I was filling out the wills and the powers of attorney and all the legal stuff that, God forbid I'd have to use or my wife would have to use if things went wrong. But filling out the paperwork and such, and I looked out the back window in our patio, and we've got a little pond and some goldfish there, and I see my daughter Shelby, she's feeding the goldfish. And I thought, like, man, you know what? Enough of this paperwork stuff. I'm gonna go see what she thinks about this. So I step out to the back door, open it up, step out there, and I'm about 15 feet away from her, and she's just feeding the goldfish. And I said, okay, here we go. Shelby, what do you think about me going to war? She didn't turn around. She just raised her hand, and she goes like, Dad, I know you're gonna be okay. You're the best at what you do, and God told me he will take care of you, so I'm not worried. And I thought, wow, let's leave that alone. And I went back inside, because how do you follow up on that? Right. So with that, I went to my son's room, and I asked him the same question. And he broke down and cried, because he thought, what he'd seen on TV, everybody dies when they go to war and all that. No, Eric, that's not going to happen at all. So ended up going to Afghanistan in January of '06, and incredibly beautiful country when they're not shooting at you.
Wow.
But,
caveat.
So the first months of February and March were pretty quiet, and then our first guy got shot in what was called the Korengal Valley. Extremely dangerous valley, but we didn't know anything about it when we showed up. And pretty much for the rest of the year, we were getting in fights in the Korengal Valley. And to the point, every time they mentioned that today's mission's going to the Korengal, I mean, just my stomach would tighten up. I just think, God, this is it. This is going to be another fight for my life for real. And also, numerous gun battles throughout the year.
Tell us about and we're going to get into this and go through that. But before we do, give us a little backstory on the Apache. What is it like as an aircraft? What can it do? And that kind of stuff.
Well, first off, the Apache is the world's premier attack helicopter, plain and simple. I was lucky enough that we still have the Alpha model Apaches. So it's a twin engine, turboshaft helicopter. It'll 21,000 pounds max gross weight, but combat weight, combat loaded and all, we're talking 18,000 pounds. And I say it was the Alpha model was the best one that we could go with, because the units that had been to Afghanistan before flew the newer Delta model one. That one was about 1,000 pounds heavier than the Alpha model. So when we showed up, actually the 26 Cav commander said, like, wow, you guys showed up in your Porsches. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's going, well, they're 1,000 pounds heavier in the Deltas, and we've got the Delta model engines, which are stronger engines with 1,000 pounds less than them. Man, we're gonna be able to fly around like crazy in these mountains. And it was, thank God, the performance was much better with the Alpha model with the Delta engines. And so the Apache has, it's a 2-seat aircraft, tandem. You can fly and shoot from both seats, it doesn't matter. Normally, the pilot in command sits in the back seat. The mission commander will normally sit in the front seat because in the front seat, you can actually control all the sighting systems. And that's to look out far and see the target, and it's got the laser. And so you can actually laser the target and such for the weapons and all. It's got 3 different types of weapons. It's got the Hellfire missiles. Those are anti-tank missiles. We did, there were no tanks there that we were going up against. Now, there were a bunch of old Soviet tanks that were busted up from back in the 80s, but there were no tanks we were going after. So what we got on the Hellfire missiles were the new blast frag warheads, which would actually, they were made for caves and they were made for homes as opposed to a blowing up a tank and all. So the other thing that we fired were rockets, 2.75-inch rockets, 19-shot tubes and all. But the thing about the rockets were we could shoot high explosive rockets, we could shoot white phosphorus rockets, and we could shoot illumination rockets, and we could shoot flechette rockets. So high explosive is self-explanatory. And then the white phosphorus was for marking targets and such. It puts out a great big white phosphorus cloud, so we can mark targets and all that. And then the illumination rounds were for nighttime. There were infrared illumination rounds, so we could pitch the helicopter up and fire them up a couple of, well, good 6,000 feet up. Wow. And then they come down on a little parachute and illuminate the entire area and all. And then the last thing we got to shoot were flechettes. So they're 2-inch hardened steel nails, and they look like nails, except instead of a flat head that you would hit the hammer on, it's got, flechettes. It's
little arrows.
Yeah, like little arrows and all. Each rocket holds about 1,900 flechettes. Wow. We would fire them in pairs, so you got almost 3,500 nails coming at you, and they come out. And this is where the front seat would laze the target, get the range. He would tell the rocket, hey, the bad guys are 2,000 meters away. So you need to go out there at 1,750 meters and blow your head off just like a shotgun, and then all the nails go out. On a perfect world, you're gonna have about a 30-meter cylinder of all these nails coming at you and all. So found out afterwards that the ground guys loved for us to use flechettes more than the high explosive rockets when we killed the bad guys. And the reason for that was we saved a lot of the maps. You could identify the people and cameras and such like that. You could identify equipment and get intelligence off of the people that we just killed. So I thought, like, wow, I didn't know that at first. So. And the last thing we had on the Apache, which is what we call the M230E1 Chain Goddess. That is the 30-millimeter automatic cannon, 625 rounds per minute, plus or minus. And each round is a high explosive, it's called the HEDP round, high explosive dual purpose round. Each round will punch through about 4 inches of steel and has an explosive radius of about 5 meters. So it's like throwing a high explosive hand grenade that can punch through armor.
If you ever wondered why I'm terrified of helicopters, it's because they can do that.
Well, no. Once you're inside that helicopter, it's not going to shoot itself. You're protected in the.
Know that?
Yeah.
You're shooting out from the helicopter.
I don't know, man. That just seems like...
Oh, see, I'm like eating this up going, and this is, I fell in love with the Apache back 30 years ago when I got my first PC computer, and I've got a simulator that was the Apache. So I learned to fly with the keyboard.
I finally understand those memes where it's like, I identify as an attack helicopter. That's why, okay.
That's right. So the better thing about the gun is that wherever we look, we can shoot. So we can shoot up to 90 degrees left and right, 60 degrees down, and it'll shoot out to 4,000 meters. And also,
Wow.
The big thing I say on that, in the Korengal Valley fight, was that we would be flying through the valley, and if the bad guys are shooting at us from either side, you just look up at them as you're flying by and shoot them as you're going by. And that's the great thing about the Apache there.
Yeah, great for you, not for them.
Well, yes,
They
that's
chose
true.
to do that too.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't have been shooting at us in the first place.
True.
That was the big deal on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the better thing about the Apache was it was designed to crash. I was involved in a crash in way back in 1995.
Ooh.
It
okay.
was the seats are armor plated. It's kind of like the A-10, or as people say, the A-10's a bathtub, titanium bathtub that you
Right.
sit in. Our seats are armor plated up to a 50 caliber round, and the floorboards are, and some of the side panels are. So the cockpit essentially is armor plated. Other parts of the helicopter, the engines and fuel lines and stuff like that, are also ballistically tolerant and such. And I'm saying it worked great because all of us got hit. The aircraft got hit numerous times throughout the year that we were there in Afghanistan. But helicopter, it's just merely a flesh wound, no big deal. Just keep on going and all. So we could fly at night, and that's really where we preferred to fly at night because we have the infrared sight system. So that monocle that goes over your eye that we can look out, with the gun, aim the gun with, at night, that's the infrared camera. And so that's kind of like flying around one-eyed. But the better thing was we also got to use night vision goggles. Infrared is strictly heat. So you can use it in the daytime and all, but at night, it's strictly heat. And night vision goggles amplify light. So there were goggle nights and there were FLIR nights, as we called it. So sometimes if it was a heavy overcast, a very dark night, and I said, there's really no lights up there in the mountains and such, the night vision goggles really don't work that well. So the infrared, we can see people miles and miles away with their heat signature and all. But then again, with the night vision goggles, you're using both eyes, and it's easier to fly with. So we would mount the goggles up on the helmet and just push a little button, and they would slide down in front of us. I would move the monocle off to the side and pull the goggles in. Now, so other things on that is that with the night vision goggles, you can see when people are shooting at you at night. You can see tracers and stuff because it amplifies light. The FLIR, you can't. So they could be shooting at us all night long, and we would never see it under the infrared and all, unless it was a great big explosion. But
What happened when you crashed? Because you mentioned that you crashed, and I want to
Yeah.
know more about that.
it was a training flight, and there at Conroe Airport down in Houston.
Oh, so it was here.
Yes, and this was way back in 1995.
Wow.
Yeah, thank God I was not knocked out of the sky or had a crash in Afghanistan. But in 1995, training flight, the helicopter had what was called an uncommanded control inputs.
Terrifying. See what you want about my Warrior. It's never done that.
Yeah, you're right on that. The Apache actually is one of the first fly-by-wire aircraft, just like the F-16. And so no longer, like your Warrior, is it push-pull tubes and pulleys, cables and pulleys and such. The Apache, it's you're moving the stick and all. It does have push-pull tubes that go through resolvers. That gets into electrical signals through the HARS system, heading attitude reference system, and then the DASIC computer, which is the stabilization computer and all. But they had a problem with the software, and the way it manifested itself is it would kick out whatever control input it wanted for a good 3 to 5 seconds. And on my case, it was the tail rotor. It kicked hard left tail, straightened it out, kicked hard right tail, straightened it out, and then when it kicked hard left on the tail, it did it so hard that the engines could not keep up with the power demand that the tail rotor was demanding, and we ended up hitting the ground kind of on our side and rolling to the left. So it was fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. I mean, I've
he's
been
in a
fine ever
bathtub.
since then.
An armored bathtub.
He's like, no big deal. My helicopter just came alive and tried to eat me.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
It was interesting. I can tell you right now, it was kind of like several of your guests have said, time compression, everything slows down. It's unreal what's happening and such. And while I was crashing, it was the same thing. I didn't realize we were crashing until we were deep into it. But that was like I said, everything's fine. Nothing's wrong. I didn't break anything. But that was 1995. And actually, as I found out later, that was the, actually, I just found out just a couple of years ago that TBI and PTS came from that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was, and I was kind of wondering why all those years things weren't right. And it wasn't until just really not even 2 years ago that I was seen again, and they were saying, oh, yeah, you got a TBI and you got PTS from that deal. So it was heavily exacerbated when I went to Afghanistan and all the shooting and stuff that happened. So, but anyway, so back to Afghanistan.
But it's fine.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it happened and all. So the Apache, like I said, twin engines, it'll fly on one. Both the transmissions and the tail rotor gearboxes, they'll fly without any lubrication for up to 30 minutes. So if you get hit, with a round and transmission loses all the oil, still got about 30 minutes you can get somewhere. And that actually happened to one of our guys way up in the mountains. The tail rotor gearbox started coming apart. He had chips in the transmission light, or chips in the tail rotor gearbox light, and he made it all the way back to Jalalabad. And it was a good 30-minute flight, and no big deal on that. The fuel cells, they are ballistically tolerant to a 50 caliber high explosive incendiary round. They'll self-seal with that. And as you're using fuel, instead of air being replaced in there, there's a nitrogen inertia unit that replaces, instead of air, it's nitrogen. So it doesn't keep it from catching fire and all. So yeah, it's all that stuff's what we learned from the Cobra helicopter, they fixed in the Apache. And the seats will stroke. And I say stroke, in a hard vertical impact, if everything works right, the gun actually collapses in between the front and the back seat. It's got its own well. The gear is on huge shock absorbers. It'll stroke coming down. The wing stores, they'll take up some of the vertical impact, and then the seat will stroke also at certain rates. So from what they told us in flight school, a 50 G impact will be reduced to a little over 10 Gs on your back if everything goes right.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so you'll have back problems. You'll be a little shorter, but
Could have been worse.
yeah.
See, you ready to fly a helicopter now?
Let's do it.
So,
But I want to fly the Apache.
I know.
oh, absolutely. And plus, it's air conditioned. That's
Oh, well,
the
that's
best thing about
Well,
the
there you
Apache
go.
there.
See, you didn't tell me that before.
Yeah. And the chicks dig it. It's when all said and done. When you go to the air shows, that's where everybody wants to see is the Apache.
Yeah.
And all. So, so one of the last fights that, like I said, all through the year in Afghanistan, numerous gun battles. Got shot at a lot, shot a lot of bad guys. Just a lot of fighting throughout the country and all. But the culmination to it was December. Actually, no, it was January 7th. January 7th, 2007. We had not been flying for the last 2 weeks. From Christmas, it started snowing, and so nobody flew. Nobody flew through January 1st. And then January 7th finally cleared up and all, and there was one last battle going into, well, it wasn't a battle. I wasn't supposed to be on this mission. I was supposed to be quick reactionary force. The other Apache that was going to be escorting the code, the general, to the Korengal Valley, his helmet broke. And our helmets on the Apache, they're $15,000 a piece. They're form-fitted, and the electronics and everything. You can't just pick up somebody else's helmet. So I had to pick up that mission itself. Once we took off, and they said, like, yeah, we're going to the Korengal Valley, I was like, this is going to hurt. Right then, my stomach tightened up, and I thought, that sinking feeling that this is going to hurt. All the way out there from Kabul to, from Bagram, I should say, all the way to the Korengal Valley, I'm just thinking, this is not right. I just didn't feel good about it and all. We had to land short at Sadabad because there was a fight going on between Sadabad and the Korengal Valley. And then they called us out there to go ahead and to help stop that fight. And when I did, we were shooting the gun at some bad guys in the caves and such, and the gun stopped working. And one thing that led to it's just a whole chain of events. that we ended up going into the Korengal Valley without bullets for the gun. As I'm circling over, the Black Hawk had landed on the Korengal outpost. They're letting off the code, and I'm expecting, okay, this is good so far. Everything's good. Circling, and when the Black Hawk, the Black Hawk takes off, and I'm like, well, he's taken off to the south, but I'm expecting him to turn to the north. No big deal. And then the ground controller says, like, egress to the north, with a sense of urgency on his voice. And I was like, wow, that's silly. Yeah, both Deadwood, my call sign, and Archangel will be egress to the north this time. And I'm like, hey, come on, Bubba, start your turn now. And he continues south. And this is to the Box Canyon, which is not even a mile away. And he's very low. And I'm like, okay, come on. He asked me where I'm at. And I'm saying, you're right 5 o'clock high. Go ahead and start your turn now. And he says, yeah, passing smoke right now, possible poo site, point of origin. He's flying over the guys that are shooting at him.
Oh my God.
And when you see the video, you'll see, like, why is he way down there and I'm up here? And so I'm like, okay, yeah. He finally gets down to the bottom and says, hey, you need to start your turn right now. And so he starts his turn back to the north again. And at that time, I'm going, like, hey, man, you need to really pick up your speed. This is really not good being down here right now. This is Taliban town, what he's flying over. And he's like 100 feet off the ground, and I'm like 500 feet. And so he starts heading back towards the Korengal outpost. And sure enough, I'm looking at him. I see the sun's coming just over the ridge line here. And when we saw in the video later, there's a bunch of bullets. They're shooting at me on this side. You can see it, and this is in the daytime. So you can see the bullets. That's how close they were. He kind of starts turning up towards me a little bit, and I see a flash out on the mast that holds the rotor, because it's chrome. I see a flash right there. I'm thinking, like, oh, wow, that's the sun glinting off of that. And then I see another RPG, and that was the RPG that went between the blades and the body of the helicopter that they fired at him from one side. Another RPG went off to the other side, hit the ridge line, and everybody's shooting at him. And I'm like, oh, shoot. I have no bullets. So I roll in on them, and they're all shooting at him. And I'm telling them, get out of here, get out of here. I couldn't switch to rockets because the Korengal outpost is right on the other side of this ravine and all, and I didn't want to overshoot, obviously, and hit our guys. So, and I had no bullets. And so they're shooting at him, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to drive right at them to get them to shoot at me. And sure enough, they end up, it was kind of funny because they're shooting at the Black Hawk, and then they look up at me and like, they see me, and they shoot at me as right as I come over them, bust over them, throwing a bunch of flares and stuff, and then pop on up, tell him to get out of here, and then line up on the ridge line, and that's where my co-pilot and I go like, ooh, there they are. They're shooting at me, and the bullets are just coming right by the canopy. And I said, time compression, everything slows down. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, just bullets coming by. You can see the flashes and everything of their gunfire and all. And then I see this, I start pitching up out of the gunfire, and then I see the puff. I see what I thought was a missile. It's right at the bottom of my canopy coming at me. I'm like, oh, crap, this is it. I'm going to get hit. This is going to hurt. And in that millisecond, it's like I flash right back to the front of my house, and I can see my wife, my son, and my daughter on both sides of her. And my wife is crying. My son is holding her leg and crying. And I can see a vehicle pull up to the front with the military guys coming out. And I'm like, wow, so this is how they're going to find out that I was killed with less than 2 weeks before I come home. And I see my daughter Shelby, and she's sitting there, she's just smiling. And I'm going like, and she's going like, yeah, this is not going to happen. And so come back, and sure enough, ended up shooting the bad guys, coming back around, shooting the bad guys. Everybody's shooting there and all. So that's how it ended when I was there in Afghanistan.
So you bounced out after you shot the bad guys.
Yeah.
And you got the other guy out too.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
And then we had to go back and get the general or the code afterwards and all after. Yeah, that was a long day.
Wow.
And you were like, that's it, I'm not coming back.
Yeah, that was.
Yelp review 0 out of 5. Would not recommend.
That's how I ended my year, and I said, yeah, okay, check that box off.
All right, that's just amazing stories. And Daniel, you've got so many more, and we're going to have you back on the show to talk about some of the other stories. I really, really appreciate you coming out and sharing your experiences in that. Just phenomenal.
That like touches my soul. You know, I mean, like how you talked about your daughter and feeding the goldfish, and then her saying like God's got you, and then circling back to that moment. That's just like so emotional.
Yeah, it was. She knew all along.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and you know, we'll have you back and continue this conversation. And thank you guys for watching, and we really appreciate you guys. All our sponsors are run by aviators, and so if you want to support the aviation family, support them, and that helps us too.
Yeah, no, and actually, what
You're just choked up from the other
Wait,
side.
yeah, we're still like.
I'm thinking about him in that like valley and stuff, and I can't get the description out of my head. I just keep replaying this like attack
too.
helicopter in my head. But anyway, we appreciate the support of our viewers as well. Thank you guys so much. Please like, subscribe, and share our content, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.